Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I encourage you to hit that like button, to subscribe for more quality content, and to share with your friends. I also encourage you to check out the playlist tab for more videos and to check out my books on my author page. I'll put the link in the description. Today, I'm very excited because I'm going to do a new episode for my Philosopher Series, which you can find on the playlist tab, including previous episodes. And I encourage you to check that out. I'm going to dedicate this episode specifically to my friend Nick, who recently passed away, and I'm very glad that I am able to dedicate this video to him. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Today I'm going to talk about Plotinus and his philosophy and how it has influenced me throughout time. And the reason why I want to dedicate this one to my friend Nick is because I remember having a conversation about Plotinus and his idea of abstract thought and the importance of contemplation. And I remember talking about these themes with my friend Nick when we were volunteering to help serve the community of homelessness and those who were homeless. And I was very moved by some of the points that my friend made about Plotinus, and I think that he brought up very interesting points, and I remember that conversation very well, and it definitely gave my life a lot of meaning. And now I see Plotinus in a beautiful light when thinking of my friend and thinking about the way in which we engaged ourselves in poetry and philosophy. So who is Plotinus? Plotinus is a Neo-Platonist which would basically be a new Platonist. So he was basically a Platonic interpreter, or an interpreter of Plato. And I would say that even if Plotinus wasn't focused as much on originality and was focused more on explicating and analyzing and interpreting what Plato was saying, I still think nonetheless that Plotinus was pretty original with his thinking, and I think that you can definitely see the influence of Plato upon Plotinus. One of the things that is definitely very specific in terms of thinking about the influence of Plato is thinking about the natural world, the physical world, the material world in which we live in, and how that world is not nearly as beautiful and intricate and abstract and complex and real as the world of forms and ideas. And so in Plotinus, you find his discussion of the sensate world, of the world of sensation, as well as contrasting that with the world of the spirit, of the spiritual world, of abstract thinking, of abstract thought. And I think that it is a very interesting idea to consider. I understand that Plotinus and Plato have influenced a lot of philosophy throughout the ages. They've also influenced religion, specifically Christianity, with thinking about how we think about the world of sensation, the world of matter, as well as the world of contemplation, devotion, thought, and perhaps even God, depending on how you interpret it. And so, for someone like Plotinus, matter is not just corrupted the way that Plato might describe, but it does actually seem to be evil. And Plotinus wouldn't literally say probably that matter is evil, because I think matter is neutral, but it is interesting to think about how matter is corrupted compared to the world of forms, compared to the world of ideas, compared to the world of thought and thinking. And Plotinus does talk about the world of sensation as not being as real. And this, as you might remember from my episodes on Plato, is very similar to what Plato was thinking. Now, Plotinus definitely was a very intense thinker in terms of responding to Plato, and he did see the idea of Stoic materialism as not being true. He thought that there was a lot more to the universe than just the things that we experience physically, and he thought that the universe itself was composed of abstract entities such as ideas or such as the forms, and of abstract thought. And this definitely influenced his disagreement with the Stoics, who were much more, I would describe, practical, less mystical, more grounded in reality, the way that they would define it. thinking more about morality as being important to how we think about the world. And all of that grounded, just like Epicurus as well, even though Epicurus wasn't a Stoic philosopher, the way in which we are grounded in the world, in the physical world. And for Plotinus, this wasn't sufficient. And so he challenged the Stoics, he challenged their way of looking at the world, and it is very interesting to think about this idea that there is more to the universe than what we see, more to the universe than what we feel in our physical bodies. Plotinus did believe in souls, and for that matter, I think Plato believed in souls as well. And I think Plotinus took this idea of the soul and ramped it up to a large degree, because he was often thinking about how we had a soul, and we have a soul, and how this soul exists, and how good this is in terms of thinking about what we are made of as being pure in a variety of ways, as being abstract, as being thought, and as basically having a soul. And as you would imagine, the soul is definitely a Christian notion, and this has been traced back to Plotinus as well as Plato. And so Plotinus took that point and brought it up to almost a religious and certainly at the very least mystical level. Now, for Plotinus, the abstract world was very important. He was often thinking about thought itself, he was thinking about reason, he was thinking about virtue, he was thinking about life and ideas and the forms. And this was very important to Plotinus's view of the world and the universe. He definitely thought that the point of existence was to think and to contemplate, and he often enjoyed writing about this process, from what I could tell, and he wrote about the way in which contemplation is life. Contemplation is as deep as we can go into reality, and even though it is very abstracted, it is still very much a part of us. And so contemplation is important for understanding virtue, for understanding the world, understanding metaphysics and life and all of these various things. And so I will admit I have been very moved by Plotinus's ideas of contemplation as being so important to our lives, as being so important to how we view the world. And as I mentioned earlier, my friend Nick inspired this episode and inspired me to think about Plotinus years ago in this light. And this is the way that I see many things from talking with my friend Nick and reading Plotinus, which is that contemplation and the idea of contemplation as being life and being the purpose of life and being what brings our life meaning and what allows us to abstract into almost safe realms, or at least safe through something like contemplation and thought and making the world better in that way. I have been very moved by that idea, and I remember having this conversation with my friend Nick about how I myself was struggling with a variety of things, such as mental illness, as well as feeling unaccepted by society, and a variety of other things that I was feeling at the time. And I knew that writing poetry, writing philosophy, writing fiction, thinking, in other words, and contemplating was very important to my growth as a person, and very important for grounding me in life, grounding me within myself, and keeping me level and stable in a very grounded sense. And I remember this conversation with my friend Nick, and how meaningful it was to talk about the importance of ideas, and to talk about virtues, to talk about the meaning of life, to talk about something like the soul, and something like us in the world being more than just the physical world. I think certainly in reductionist science, there is an emphasis on the material world, and even in science at large. But in my understanding, there is much more to human life than just the things that we see around us. And often these spiritual concepts, these thoughts, these ideas influence us in a variety of ways. And while I probably wouldn't take this idea as far as Plotinus necessarily, I do think that contemplation is important to how we look at the world and how we understand ourselves and how we live. Now, these are a lot of Plotinus's ideas, and you can definitely see the influence of Plato, and with thinking about how Plotinus was a very mystical kind of thinker, and he was someone who thought a lot about life and thought, and I myself have devoted a lot of my life to contemplation as well, such as through my YouTube videos or through my writing, and I think that it's a very important thing. But as always, I would also like to analyze the maybe critiques of Plotinus and the way in which Plotinus has influenced me. So without further ado, let's dive right into that. So there were a couple points that I had in terms of thinking about the limits of Plotinus and his thinking, one of which is the importance of thought. Now, I myself very much put a lot of emphasis on thought and thinking and contemplation. As I've said, I think that it's extremely important, but not everybody in the world operates in this realm. Some people are very good with the material world, manipulating the material world, such as through a variety of crafts like carpentry, as an example, or manual labor, and they're probably not going to be thinking too heavily about what Plotinus is saying. And I do think that there is value to this in the sense that not everything has to be related to thought. So even if I myself find thought and contemplation to be extremely important, I don't see it as the only thing that I would do. I do think that there is a lot more to life, that there are different ways in which people look at life, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that there's a place for different types of thinking, and that I myself don't want to take Plotinus's arguments too far and cut out all of the other beautiful things that are in the world, the diversity that we have, because other people do not necessarily contemplate as much, and they see the world in a completely different way, which I think is very valuable. The other thing that I wanted to say is that life isn't always just ideas. There are critiques of the idea that ideas are not the most important aspect of reality, that there are other ways in which we can look at reality, and I do think that this is an important view. I do think that even though ideas are very important, at least to me and to people that I talk with, I think that they do not influence everything in the world. I think that ideas are incredibly important, but I don't think that abstract thought and abstract ideas are the only ways in which we can go about the world. And I think this is very important. Nonetheless, as you can imagine, with talking with my friend Nick and thinking about my poetry and thinking about my hard times and the way that writing and thought and contemplation got me through things, you can imagine how contemplation, as an example, is very important to me, and how it helps me understand the world, how it helps me understand myself, and I think all of that is very valuable. So I'm very grateful that I was able to dedicate this episode on Plotinus to my friend Nick, and may we all seek to do better in life, and may we all seek to be our best selves. And yeah, go read some Plotinus. I encourage you to read Plotinus, and I encourage you to check out his writing, and I think that you will enjoy it. His most famous work, in fact probably his main work, is the Aeneids, which is a collection of treatises. It is a complicated text, and I have an excerpted copy of his Aeneids, and it has influenced me in a variety of ways, and I very much like his thinking and his thought, and I find it to be very valuable. I'm Phoenix, and thank you for watching. There is much more content to come, so keep a lookout, and yeah, I will see you next time. Thank you for watching.